Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith back again, this time for my card picks for a fight night in London for the UFC. Brady, of course, taking on the former champion Leon Edwards. So Sean Brady, Leon Edwards in our main event. Fascinating card. It's a really good fight night card. Really good. I double checked a few times that we weren't missing a pay-per-view here. Just a lot of big names, a lot of established names, really good main event. So I'm going to breeze by the first couple simply because not a lot of meat on the bone in the first couple fights, but it gets pretty good pretty fast. We thought I'd start out with Nathaniel Wood versus Morgan Charier. Charier, of course, from France. Nathaniel Wood, more UFC experience. He's been in the UFC longer. Fought some decent names, Andre Fili, Charles Rosa, etc., John Dodson. He's a mid-level guy with more wins than losses. Hasn't taken on any next-level talent. Even his losses, Casey Kenny, the aforementioned John Dodson, nobody great. No title contenders in there, really. He's been in the UFC for a long time, has never gotten out of the mid-ranks, always goes to decision. Hasn't won by finish since like 2019. So the guy just is a hardworking, pretty well-rounded, blue-collar kind of fighter who tends to win by decision. There, got it. Morgan Charier hasn't been in the UFC as long. Came up, his last three fights have been in the UFC. He's 2-1 in that stretch. Won his last one by knockout. 2 wins are by knockout, so he's more heavy-handed. But when I look at the odds, it is right now, according to Best Fight Odds, it is Charier maybe minus 150, 160-ish. For those kind of odds, Nathaniel Wood, you can get as much as plus 140, depending on your book. I got to go with Nathaniel Wood simply because there's not a lot separating these guys. There's not enough UFC experience for Charier to let us know really what we're dealing with yet. He's heavy-handed, but hasn't had to fight anybody great. Nathaniel Wood has fought some pretty tough guys. Not what I would call great, but tough. And so I got to go with Nathaniel Wood if you can get plus money on him, which you can. So I'd say Nathaniel Wood, safe pick is by decision. He gets it done by decision. So you make a little bit of money there. Moving on up the card. Next fight is Jordan Venic versus Chris Duncan. When I was first looking at this, I studied Venic because he fought Paul Hughes twice, and Paul Hughes fought in Bellator, and I had to call Paul Hughes' fight in Bellator a little while ago when we were in London. And so I watched the Venic fights. Venic's a tough dude. Very, very aggressive. Both those fights very, very close. He's heavy-handed. Chris Duncan from Scotland, what I found so interesting about this fight is Chris Duncan, much like our last fight, if you're betting on this, you're kind of betting on the UFC experience, where he's had 4 fights in the UFC. He's 3-1. His only loss to Manuel Torres by rear naked choke, but not a large body of work. Same thing with Venic. He's fought in the UFC once. He lost by decision. So we don't know that much about either guy necessarily at the UFC level, but when you look at the odds, they're absurd. It is Chris Duncan, ready? Plus 310 over Venic. Venic is a 4-1 dog. You can get minus 400 on him at most books. I just don't see that in the numbers here. Can he win? Certainly can. But at 4-1 money, the idea that one guy's 3-1 in the UFC against marginal talent, we haven't learned anything yet, and the other guy is 0-1 in the UFC, all right, lost by decision his first time out. A lot of times the nerves gets you your first time in the UFC. That's not enough to tell me someone should be a 4-1 favorite in this fight at all. So for the money, I got to go for Venic. Very, very easy for that one. Jesus Christ, 4-1 odds on a guy who, lost his UFC debut, but 13-3 is comparatively experienced. A lot of people stumble in their UFC debut. Jesus, 4-1, are you kidding me? So the first two were kind of defined by the odds. Moving up, the ladies, Molly McCann versus Oleksiejczuk Thonera. I was never a fan of Molly McCann, not personally, but when I saw the push she was getting, I understood it. She's a Scouser. She's from Liverpool. She can sell tickets out there. It was a really interesting story. Her and their friendship with Conor McGregor and all this stuff, and it was a cool story, right? But skill-wise, her strength is her boxing. The problem is, boxing is the hardest martial art to use in MMA of the ones that are actually regularly used. Because if you're in punching range, it means I can take you down, right? Short-range striking is very hard to pull off. without elbows and Muay Thai and clinch and all that stuff. So boxing by itself can be tough to use. So Molly McCann, her strength is her boxing. It's the hardest one to use. She got enough wins in high-profile situations that she was hot for a minute. But as soon as she was, I was like, I don't see the skill set for her to be a sustained factor at 115 and 125. I just don't see it. And as it's gone on, that's been a little more justified. She's 1-3 in the last 4 fights. Lost the last one by unanimous decision, was finished by submission. The other 2 is against Erin Blanchfield and Yulia Stoliarenko. So I saw like her ceiling kind of early on. I was like, I don't think she's great on the ground, and her style is going to lend to a lot of takedowns. Thonera from Brazil, just getting into the UFC, by the way. So as I've said before with previous fights on this card, we don't have a large body of work to really know what we're dealing with. But when you look at it, the odds for this fight, Molly McCann plus 150, you can get plus 164 depending on your book. Thonera, a favorite, about minus 180 up to minus 200. So she's about a 2-1 favorite. I see what the UFC is doing here, where Thonera is 11-1. They want to see if she's the real goods. And so let's throw her against a veteran who's a little bit limited to see what she can do. I think this is set up for Thonera to look good. I say Thonera, once again, by submission, first 2 rounds, right? So you're not going to make a ton of money because she's 2-1 favorite, but by submission in the first 2 rounds, that's how I think it's going to go. Gunnar Nelson, Kevin Holland. If you know my channel, you know where I'm going here. Kevin Holland is a guy I think, peaked with the Jacare fight. Kind of caught lightning in a bottle there. If you saw, it was this weird upkick knockout. Since then, guys have figured him out. He has had his opportunities against elite talent. Khamzat Chimaev wiped the floor with him. De Ridder submitted him his last time out. He's become kind of an Iron Man of the UFC, where he'll fight 4 or 5 times a year and making decent money because he's a decent draw. People like watching him fight. It's a numbers game. If I fight 4 times, I'm making a pretty good living. I think he's kind of become that guy. Like, we know you're not going to fight for a title. You're athletic, you're explosive in certain situations, but you might make a lot of technical mistakes. They're starting to catch up with you. So that's kind of the story on Kevin Holland. When it comes to Gunnar Nelson, this is a guy who has been in the UFC. He fought on a Fuel card. Anybody remember UFC on Fuel? Like 12 years ago? That's how long he's been in the UFC. Had some time off between, it was like 2019 to like 2021 or 2022, whatever it was. He had a long layoff. Came back, he's won 2 in a row, Brian Barberena and Takashi Sato. But every time he stepped up, Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Santiago Ponzinibbio, back when he was a world beater, have beaten him. Lost to Damian Maia as well. So every time it's been, are you ready for the next level? He's not. He's below that. But he's probably at the upper level of the mid-level. That's a place where Kevin Holland was maybe recently. Now he's starting to lose a lot more. So I got to go with Gunnar Nelson, especially when I look at the odds. It's pretty much a coin flip fight. You can get plus 122. Plus 112 for Kevin Holland, minus 122 for Gunnar Nelson. So Gunnar Nelson, a slight favorite, but pretty close. Close enough that I'm taking Gunnar Nelson. Also, if you want to make money, look for the early stoppage because, as I said, Kevin Holland, when he does go wrong, he tends to go wrong early. He does something dumb and ends up giving up his back or some kind of, difficult position early. So an early submission is always a good bet if you're going against Kevin Holland. So I got to go with Gunnar Nelson over Kevin Holland. On to the main event, Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. Sean Brady, a guy, when I first saw him in the UFC, when I talk about it factor, where you usually see a champion, a future champion, someone's going to be great, and you go, that guy's got it. Whatever it is, that guy's got it. I thought Sean Brady was that guy. I really did. When I saw him early in the UFC, man, I love his grappling ability. He's strong as a bull, very well-rounded. And if you follow submission grappling, he's beating guys in submission grappling who grapple full-time. He beat Richie Martinez, who isn't, at the top of the world right now. He's a little past his prime, but a 10th planet guy who just grapples. That's all he does. He's not a mixed martial artist, doesn't know how to throw a punch. He's a 10th planet grappling guy, and Sean Brady choked him out with a guillotine. Beautiful stuff. Beat Craig Jones. Now, I know Craig Jones, it wasn't allowed to use leg locks because they didn't want to, UFC got to, blow his leg out, which took away a lot of Craig Jones's offense. But still, to even get that over a grapple like Craig Jones, who once again, all the guy does is grapple. That's it. Can't throw a kick. Has no idea. So he's out grappling professional grapplers. That's how good he is. Coming off the biggest win of his career, that was a decision win over Gilbert Burns. Biggest in terms of name value. Destroyed Kelvin Gastelum. That was a one-sided fight. The guy is really, really good. Belal Muhammad clipped him, knocked him out, end of round 2. I don't want to say fluke. I don't want to say that. Belal Muhammad earned that win 100%. But this is a guy who had never lost. I'd never even seen him be seriously hurt. Belal Muhammad is not a knockout puncher, not a great finisher, and got clipped and never went down, but was up. Bing, bang, 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 bang. Referee stops fight. Justified stoppage, by the way. But this idea that I think Belal just clipped him, and that's the way the cookie crumbles, and that's the way it goes. But the way I see this fight going is the grappling of Sean Brady is going to be his major offense. Can Leon Edwards stop it? If you're going with Leon Edwards, what you're seeing is the admittedly flat performance against Belal Muhammad was an aberration. He just had an off night. I thought he had beaten better grapplers in Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. Now, those grapplers were a little bit past it. I think Belal's no spring chicken. I mean, look at it that way. But Belal just was the grinder and able to take him down. But he just seemed flat that night. The problem with Leon Edwards as a fighter, right, from a coaching analysis perspective, he's not a knockout puncher. The knockout head kick over Kamaru Usman is a real aberration. He typically doesn't do that. So what it is he's ticky-tack, bang, 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 keep you at a distance, always angling, always moving, always a little bit offline, so he's never directly in front of a grappler. He's really good at that. But he picks you apart. He's not a knockout puncher. So the problem is he doesn't have that Robbie Lawler kind of power to keep you away from him. Where he can rock you and go, oh, okay, I'm not going to shoot on you anymore. You keep going after him, but his angling, his footwork keeps him alive. It's a busy style. And I work with Chris Algieri at Pro Box TV, and one of the things he likes to talk about, he goes, boxing is really tiring. Moving and angling and and always having to stay on your bike the whole time. So, throwing power shots every now and then doesn't wear you out like boxing the whole time. And in this case, kickboxing the whole time. Leon Edwards has to kickbox the entire time to keep Sean Brady off him because his power's not going to do it. He's 33 years old. That's not old necessarily for a 170-pound division. He is experienced. 27 professional fights is a lot. Also, one of the things you usually want to bet against, generally speaking, is champ losing title, non-softball comeback. Meaning, a lot of times at champ, they've done a lot for the division. We like them. They're good people. The UFC will give them a bounce-back fight. This is not a bounce-back fight. Period. This is all right, are you still one of the elite? Let's see. Take on Sean Brady. This is not an easy fight. Imagine you're at the top of Mount Everest, you plant your flag, oh my God, you're enjoying the view, no one ever does this, and you blink your eyes and you're down at base camp. And you got to do that again. But you've already been there. So the wonderment of putting your flag there and oh my God, it's the most amazing thing ever isn't there. And you're looking up at that peak going, do I have to do this again? You may love mountain climbing. You may want to get back to the top of Everest. That's certainly possible. It is real tough to mentally bounce back to climbing that ladder again. Once again at 33, once again, you've already been there. Very, very difficult thing to do. All those things together. I think he'll look better than he did against Belal Muhammad. I do think he looked flat that night. No disrespect to Belal. I think Bilal's a great fighter. But I do believe that Leon is going to look better than he did against Belal Muhammad. I do believe Sean Brady is going to have to do some things he didn't have to do in other fights against other strikers. I think he's going to have to be, his head, his footwork's going to have to be better. His head movement's going to have to be better, right? He's going to have to really go striking to take down very, very fluidly and efficiently, but I think he will. I think Brady is kind of coming into his own and still has, to me, that shine of a future champion. Not super young at 32. So he's got to get it done in the next couple years if he's going to have any kind of run at 170 pounds, but I think he has it in him. When I'm looking at the odds, right now I look at Best Fight Odds because it has all the odds on it. I missed a fight because it's out of order here. I'll get back to it in a second. But anyway, Sean Brady is right now a minus 162 over Leon Edwards. I think that's about right. I'd still go with Sean Brady. Probably doesn't finish him. So one that was out of order because a lot of times the odds sites have it out of order, so I missed it. Carlos Ulberg versus Jan Blachowicz. This is a really fascinating fight because Jan Blachowicz is one of those guys who, obviously former champion, lost last time out to Alex Pereira. That was 2 years ago, coming up on 2 years ago, middle of 2023. So yeah, he's been out for a while, almost 2 years, taking on a guy named Carlos Ulberg, who is, Eric Nixick gave an interview about Carlos Ulberg and said he's never held pads for anyone who hits as hard as Carlos Ulberg. He said, I've had to, like my hands are hurting me. The guy can hit like a freight train. Big, 6'4", excellent kickboxer, excellent record, but hasn't fought the kind of talent that Jan Blachowicz has fought. Not even close. When you look at it, this is really the most significant test easily of Carlos Ulberg's career. He beat Volkan Oezdemir his last time out. Volkan Oezdemir has been through a lot of fights. He isn't the fighter he once was. I don't know how great Volkan Oezdemir ever was, but able to beat him by unanimous decision. Other than that, aren't any real names on his resume. He's beaten a bunch of guys, a lot of them in impressive fashion. He is a knockout puncher, 11 wins, 8 finishes, but it's the idea that Jan Blachowicz has fought all the great talent. So I would have been leaning Carlos Ulberg in this because I see what the UFC is trying to do, which is kind of inject some new blood. Ulberg is not young. He's 34 years old, but new blood in terms of like a new face, great kickboxer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I looked at the odds, and they're freaking absurd. It is Jan Blachowicz plus 240. Carlos Ulberg, a minus 300 favorite. You gotta go with Jan Blachowicz for that kind of money. I'm still leaning Ulberg. If you would have gone to him and said, who's going to win? I would say Carlos Ulberg, probably, but not 3-1. A veteran guy, a guy who's really well-rounded, a guy who might take Ulberg places he's just not used to going. He's old for MMA, and he's 42 years old right now, Jan Blachowicz. So a lot of the X factors point to Ulberg, but Ulberg's not a spring chicken, okay? 34 years old himself. So it's this idea that you don't have odds that are that skewed for somebody who really hasn't shown us, everything in the UFC against top talent. Jan Blachowicz has. We know Jan Blachowicz's ceiling. We do, and it's damn near the top. We don't know where Ulberg's ceiling is really. And so I don't see how 3-1 makes sense. So just for the money, you got to go for Jan Blachowicz. If you're going to go with Ulberg, do it, obviously, first round knockout. Okay, that he catches the old man early, 2 years off, got some ring rust, catches him early. But 3-1, I just don't see those odds. So a little bit out of order because they had the wrong order on the sheet I was looking at. So those are my picks for UFC Fight Night. Let me know. I will own my picks as always on Monday. I'll see you soon.